So this is Happy, Healthy Mind. And we're going to work with this for a few months. I'm not sure exactly how long yet because things tend to reveal themselves as we go along. A happy, healthy mind means a lot of different things. Part of what we always do in this work is we look for things that are in the way, for obstacles, and we try to reduce the obstacles. So, for instance, if we're around somebody who looks at us with contempt, that would be a hard hit on our self-esteem. So we might want to work with that internally in terms of not caring so much about what they think about us. We also might want to limit their access to us. There's a lot of different things that we can do, but the first thing that we need to do is to notice these are the things that are obstacles to me feeling happy and having a healthy mind. And then what can we do to build resilience and build happiness? There's a lot of practices that we can do for that. So one of those would be self-compassion practices. And then we get into, well, in order to actually have self-compassion, we need to have a regulated nervous system. And Deb Dana talks about that. We've been working with that for the last couple of months. It's complex in a way, and yet it's very simple in a way. It's like what helps us, what hurts us, how can we limit the amount of hits to our self-esteem and to our healthy mind. And that might mean that we don't watch as much news, or it might mean that we watch more good news. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work with this. So Gabor Mate's book, Scattered Minds, The Origins and Healing of Attention Deficit Disorder. And I think it's just called Scattered if you're in the US, different publishers. And also When the Body Says No, his book about the cost of hidden stress. Both of those are very good resources. So last couple of months, we were working with Deb Dana and her book Anchored and her course on the nervous system, Befriending the Nervous System. And this time we're going to use these two books in particular from Gabor Mate and some of his teachings as a base kind of for our exploration. And he talks about self-esteem in Scattered Minds in a very deep way. And that's part of what we're going to work with today. So this quote, knowing oneself comes from attending with compassionate curiosity to what is happening within. And there's so much to that. Part of it is that disconnection that happens with trauma. We don't actually want to connect with ourselves. And part of it is our cultural conditioning, that we feel like if we really knew what was going on inside, we'd be disgusted, or there's something really bad. And then we have core deficiency beliefs that form from our childhood experiences. Like if I experienced being kind of alone and on my own, I might have concluded that I wasn't lovable. It's very common. And a lot of people are talking about that now because it really helps to understand what are the beliefs that we formed from our experiences. So these are two references, and he's so well known now. And you could watch hundreds of hours on YouTube, I think. His original TED Talk from Rio went viral, several million people. His movie, The Wisdom of Trauma, about his work that Science and Non-Duality created with him, and millions of people have viewed that as well. So there's no shortage of resources for his work. So let's get into self-esteem and have a look at what he's saying about that. So one of the main things about self-esteem is that it's not about what we accomplish, it's how we view ourselves. So like many things, it's our relationship with ourselves. In our culture, a lot of self-esteem is based on who we are, what we do, our accomplishments. If you have good money, good job, you have the hot car, you have the people that look like you're successful, then you're considered to be successful. And you might have a lot of real positive self-regard based on what you've accomplished. And the issue with that isn't that you shouldn't accomplish things, that you shouldn't feel really proud of yourself or give yourself esteem from working hard and creating things and achieving things. That's not really the problem. The problem is that when we don't have those accomplishments, that we might think that we're not a worthy human being. So to link our worth as a human being with production and success is something that's quite prevalent in Western culture, especially. And in Eastern cultures, it's more of a sense of basic goodness, or of our core is divine, or that we are worthy just because we're a human being, not because of what we do. So if we would just kind of look at these evaluators and just notice, if you read about conditional self-esteem, notice what's happening in your body and your breath. It's very much based on evaluation. It's fickle. So we might feel really good about ourselves if we succeed, and really bad about ourselves if we don't. It's very much dependent on what other people think and what they think of us. And it's all about what we do, not who we are. And I think all of us could say we've had experiences of both positive and negative conditional self esteem. Times when we've really thought poorly of ourselves because we've missed the mark somehow. And times when we've succeeded in something, we got the job, or we've created a family that's connected, or whatever it might be. So we all have that experience. So notice what your reaction or your response is now. I am a worthy human being, whether or not I can do, you could finish the sentence, whether or not I'm a success, whether or not I have a lot of friends, whether or not I'm included in things. I'm a worthy human being. And this doesn't depend on my circumstances. It's independent of what other people think as well. So, what does that feel like as you're considering that? Esteem is about who I am. And as we get further into healing trauma work, we realize that who we are is wonderful. That we might have some false core deficiency beliefs. We might have a hesitation to get to know ourselves because of trauma. But who we are as we experience being inside and being really connected is wonderful. And that's something that we might not have known. So, adults with ADD, attention deficit disorder, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, have deep shame. And this predates the poor achievement. So, what he's trying to say here is, a lot of times we look at people with, especially adults who have ADD, and feel badly about themselves because they haven't accomplished what a lot of other people have. So when people have trouble focusing, or people have trouble accomplishing because they can't focus, then they have a variety of experiences that feel like there's something wrong with me. What society thinks about me must be true. I'm not any good. But what he's saying is that the low self esteem and the ADD arise from stress in the parenting environment and disrupted attachment and attunement. So, this is something, and this is the reason why I brought this forward into this, because not everybody here has ADD or ADHD. That is a specific way that the brain works. And one of the ways that he describes it in the book is that if you were to look at your brain as having an intersection, there's north-south traffic, and there's east-west traffic. And there's a traffic controller or a cop or somebody at that intersection saying, okay, you guys stop for a while, the other one flows, you guys stop, the other one flows. And one of the reasons that a stimulant like Ritalin works with an ADHD brain is because part of the brain, that traffic cop, is asleep. The Ritalin wakes it up, and then it comes on duty, and that's what helps people to actually focus. Otherwise, there's just this chaos of traffic all the time, and it's very hectic and scattered in the mind. When we look at the experiences that come from that, it's easy to see someone whose brain isn't really working all that well, who's having trouble focusing, is going to have a lot of experiences where they feel badly about themselves. So there is that. And what he's saying is, before that, even, that our inability to win the full and unconditional acceptance of the adult world was not their failure. And so we take that on, and this is something that is true for people with ADD and people without. It's almost universal, especially in our culture, that as we grow up through childhood, we can't win the enough connection with the adults in our life. And so we feel like a failure. We feel like we turn against ourselves. And we've done a lot of work around this. We turn against ourselves. We feel like it must be our fault. So when we're trying to prove our worth, these are just some of the things that happen. We get argumentative. So sometimes we might think, well, if you have poor self-esteem, you're always going to be kind of compliant and shy. But that's not actually the case. Sometimes people with low self-esteem get very argumentative and kind of go to the mat for their to win an argument. We tend to stay in relationships longer than what we maybe is healthy for us. We might have a really strong no inside of ourselves if we even are attending to ourselves enough to realize that. But we still say yes because we want to be liked. We have overwork, we have the inner critic, we have escaping through all kinds of addictions. So we're trying to prove our worth. And these are some of the ways that we're doing it. And they don't really work because we don't really have a lasting or a deep fundamental sense of who we are based on those kind of strategies. So this quote, the effect of trauma is that we disconnect from ourselves, our sense of value in the present moment. From Gabor Mate, I use that a lot. And what he's talking about here is that when we work at being worthy of approval and being included in family and human society, that's something that indicates that there's a lack of knowing. So having this strong core self relies on this brain heart connection, that we have to be in touch with our emotional side. So when we talk about being an emotionally mature adult, that is not something I felt like I was until probably I was in my 50s before I really had a sense of, okay, I'm an adult now. And not to say that I always feel like I'm emotionally mature in any moment, but generally speaking, I feel like I know who I am and I've taken responsibility as an adult. I have a lot of connection within now. And that's something that I didn't used to have. So when we look at a culture where none of us are encouraged to actually know what we feel and to process our emotions in a healthy way, it diminishes the amount that we feel like we have this sense of okayness of who we are. And then the other thing that relates more specifically to ADD is that someone who's in the extremes of emotion and behavior and can't master their impulses, then they're not going to feel any kind of good self-esteem because they're always having this shame, probably from themselves as well as other people, that there's something wrong with me, that I can't manage to stay present, or that I can't manage to control my temper. I keep going off into these wild emotional states, and we have an impact of that. And that's hard for us. It's hard to believe that we're fundamentally worthy when we have behavior. So then again, if we pull back and we look at what is the behavior and why is that behavior there, then that can help us to understand some of that. So children know themselves through being known by others. And when we don't feel known, when we feel this alienation, we just disappear because it's too painful to stay present. So sometimes we'll disappear into fight, flight, or freeze responses, and we can disappear completely into them. We can have no awareness really of what we're doing. We just get lost in whatever the addiction is. And we might get lost in a state of freeze where we're really not present to ourselves or anybody else. And so these are really common patterns. But the key here is that we know ourselves through being known by others. And children especially need that, but adults do too. And that's one of the things that happens here all the time. People are able to say what they feel. Other people get it. And on the Zoom screen, we can see people nodding their heads or sending us little hearts. And that's one of the ways that we get to know ourselves as we try out, how do I actually feel when we're doing the inquiry? And then we have an opportunity to share that and know ourselves through each other. So let's pause here and do a practice. So before we go into the practice, let's take a moment to get settled in your body again. So when we say emotionally regulate into ventral vagal and stay connected with your adult resource self in this moment, let's take a moment to do that. So one of the ways that we can do that is we can look around the room, we can ground ourselves and orient ourselves to where we are. And we can notice that we're going to look into core deficiency beliefs in a moment. And that's kind of hard. We might have a lot of resonance with that already. Our body might have kind of tensed up a bit. So take a few deep breaths, look around the room, orient yourself to here. You could hold your own hand. If you're feeling quite kind of drawn into something now, or when we're doing this, you could do some tapping, tap on your forehead, take your attention away from your thoughts and bring it into the sensation and sound of the tapping. You could put your image in a frame, all of those tools that we already know that we use. And if you're not very familiar with the tools yet, there's lots of ways to learn that. They're in the emergency practices page on my website. But the point is that right now, we need to keep a toe in ventral vagal. And ventral vagal is that state of, I know that I'm here. I know what's going on. I'm connected. I'm not shaming myself. I'm not in a whirlpool of shame or something. I'm right here. And as we look into these beliefs, so I might look at that belief, I'm not lovable. I could put the words into a kind of in my mind's eye. I could put them on the other side of the room, put them in a frame. I could see right now, I'm looking at the words or I'm being present to the experience of feeling like I'm not lovable. So that's a little bit different than having that kind of being drawn into that really deep feeling of I'm not lovable. And we have all the thoughts that go along with that. We might go into a shame posture, our body kind of slumps. So staying regulated with our resourced adult self is key to doing these practices. So let's just look at one belief. So come up with something that feels true for you, maybe more true in the past than it is now. Something that comes to mind as a core deficiency belief. And we have many experiences, usually chronic, long term, everyday, sometimes not very dramatic experiences. Sometimes they're very traumatic. What were the experiences that led you to believe that? So we're coming back into childhood usually now. What experiences led me to believe that I'm inherently bad, for instance? And really maintain your awareness of your breath, of your body. If you want, you could jot some down or you could just take a mental note. And as experiences come up, notice your response to the experiences as you're witnessing them, as you're observing them right now. And then if you wanted, you could focus in on one experience or one that represents a common experience that you had. So if we were to look at, I'm stupid or I'm not smart enough, it might be to do with school. You might bring to mind a time when you brought your report card home and you were dreading it all day, maybe all week. And then you get home and you get some kind of response from your parents, which kind of really nails in that belief I must be stupid. Or maybe it's something else, like you're being laughed at for something you said at the dinner table. So bring it to mind and keep your awareness that you're looking at something that's coming up in your mind, you're remembering something. And notice your breath. You could hold your hands. You could stay grounded right now in this moment. And what are some of the experiences that led you to believe that that was true? You could do some tapping. If something gets kind of intense, then open your eyes, back away from it a bit. Just orient yourself again to this moment. These are false core deficiency beliefs. They're not true. And we had an experience or experiences that led us to believe they were. One of the things that happens when we're a little bit in our ventral vagal, that state of calm and trust and connection, is that we could have some compassion for our younger self that had those experiences. So instead of going into a shame spiral, we might go into some awareness that that was a hard thing that we went through. We felt really alone. It's a really distressing experience to feel that way. Let yourself feel into that a little bit too. And then if we look at the next part, I need to hang on to this belief because let's take a pause for a minute here and notice what was it, what was helpful about that belief. So if you have a belief that you're not very smart, you're not smart enough, and you're never going to get the approval of a parent, maybe the way it was protecting you is that it stopped you from trying so hard, or it kind of numbed you out. Well, of course, I'm not going to get approval from them. So you're not so disappointed. So look at what were the benefits at that time when you were a child. What were the benefits that came with believing that? And then it's going to sit with that for a minute until maybe there's more than one, there could be several. If I believe I'm not lovable, I'm not going to even try. Or maybe I tried all the time. I was mother's little helper or something. And we could let ourselves have some compassion for how hard that was. And if we're really doing things that help us to be included, that helps us to feel safer. It helps us to feel like we're part of the family. So that would be a benefit. And then as we come to the last part of it, I need to hang on to this belief because notice what comes up. And we're really just looking for our unconscious beliefs here. So when we hanging on to something, there's always a reason. Oftentimes the reason is historical. There's something about this belief that kept us safer. So we're looking to see what is that? Why do I need to hang on to this? And in our conscious mind, we know we don't. We're looking for that stickiness somewhere. Why do you need to hang on to that belief? What would be helpful about that? How would that help protect you? And then let that kind of come to a rest. And let's just experiment with this for a minute. These words, I'm 100% ready to let it go. This belief, this core deficiency belief, I'm 100% willing to let it go. Notice what your response is. It might be in thoughts. It might be, oh, I'll never be able to do that. What's the point? It might be, yeah. What's your response? And notice your response in thoughts as well as in your breath and in your body. And then come back. Let that be, let that kind of settle a little bit. So these unconscious beliefs, the survival strategies that we have, we're going to hold on to them until we don't need them any longer. And that's the way the nervous system works. And these are unconscious and they can be brought into awareness by this kind of inquiry, is one way to do that. And that we need this ongoing experience of being attuned with ourselves to heal this disconnection. So, a lot of these have to do with ways that we disconnect from ourselves. When we go into compliance or kind of some kind of pleasing, people pleasing, we're trying to accomplish something. We're trying to feel included. We're trying to get people to like us, something like that. And so the idea here and the way that we heal is to learn how to stay regulated so that we're aware of our experience and that it's not unconscious anymore. And then once it's conscious, we can come up out of dorsal, out of freeze, or up out of fight and flight into that trusted and connected state. And that's when we can be self-compassionate. And that's when we can know that we're whole. We can't really know that when we're in fight, flight, or freeze. We have to come up into this state. And when we're in the state, then we know that. And so it kind of works in many different layers there. So for the next several minutes, let's just look into this. So my beliefs that were conditioned by my personal experience, so we're not arguing with them. We believe that there was something wrong with me. If I had been something that I wasn't, I could have stopped being hurt or I would have been loved. So that's the basic conditions around core deficiency beliefs. Something happened where we felt not protected, not included, and we concluded it was our fault and we tried to make it better and it didn't work. So if you were to take a moment to really tune in with that age, maybe an age is coming up, or you could just kind of think of yourself as a child. So from here, from this moment in time, you could let your inner child know it was not your fault. And I'm really sad you had those experiences that led you to believe that it was. And I'm here with you now. You're not alone anymore. And you don't have to figure it out. And you don't need those old survival strategies anymore. Because I'm here with you now. I love you. There's nothing wrong with you. And just let yourself feel into that. Notice it in your body. And notice if you can feel that connection. If you can be in ventral vagal, that state of trust and connect. And if not, it might be that you need to do some more grounding and orienting, or you could do a breathing practice, do some tapping. We don't control our fight, flight, and freeze, and we don't control our unconscious perception of threat. What we can do is get ourselves regulated again and then really let ourselves know that we're safe now. Let yourself know that in your body by relaxing your body. If there's something your body wants to do, like if you want to get up and move or shake your fists or whatever it might be, let yourself do that if you want. Nobody's watching. And then come back into connection. So, connection in this case, meaning with that child that believed something like that. There was something wrong with me. There was my fault. It was just let yourself come into connection with that child and then let them know. And lots of relaxing and softening, lots of awareness of the breath, of your thoughts. Check in with yourself to see how much on board you are all the way down. So your adult self might know this. Maybe your inner child is still kind of holding back and like Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. That's okay. We don't have to rush into something. We don't have to push ourselves to believe something. And then when we get towards freedom with this, you could just kind of close your eyes for a moment and touch in and see. I know in my cells, I know in every cell in my body that I'm fundamentally good and intrinsically worthy as I am in this moment. I'm worthy of being included in the human family, just as I am. I don't have to worry about that. That's a given. And let that really kind of soak in. Let yourself feel into that. And if there's some part of you that doesn't quite believe that yet, that's okay. That could be here too.